Shabbat Shalom again, everyone. And I must say, I don't always feel this way, but I do feel almost as if sitting here, you may say to yourself, more words. How can words help us? I know that we all felt and we all feel so brokenhearted. Remember a week ago, I was standing here and I named the names of the 10 people who were so cruelly gunned down at the Top supermarket in Buffalo by a white supremacist with an automatic weapon. It's a week later, and I say again and again and again, a story of mass murder repeats itself in this country of ours. And this, by the way, is this week is the anniversary of one of the first school mass shootings in Columbine, Colorado. Another situation, children mercilessly, innocent children gunned down. So 19 children are dead with a weapon that made forensic experts have to take swabs from the mouths of parents in order to identify their children. Children who were brought to their graves, often unrecognizable. And 2 more adults, 2 teachers, were also gunned down. Added to the tragedy, I read the story of the husband of one of the teachers who went to visit the makeshift memorial to say a prayer. So he was now a father of 4 children, and he got home and he died of a heart attack. What can I say? We all share in this horrific pain. Once again, overwhelming tragedy is experienced. And I, who need the words to comfort, had such difficulty speaking this week or writing this week. There were a few people who wrote me emails saying, "We haven't heard from you yet, Rabbi." And I didn't know what to write. Sure, I could do the same old kind of coming together in tragedy, extending condolences, prayers, but this time I too felt overwhelmed by the violence and the deaths, the scope of the tragedy. But I know that it is my responsibility to give voice to broken hearts. There is this notion, and I believe Leonard Cohen spoke about it beautifully, that a broken heart can let the light in. Perhaps millions of broken hearts, our own hearts joining with those throughout our nation and the world, will let some light in, perhaps. And this time when we speak of this light, may we understand that it is not just the light of comfort or the Spirit, but it's also the light of understanding and knowledge. And so many need to come to that place of understanding. You know, for myself, I fear watching these things on the news. I become hardened to it. It's just much too frequent. But we also know that something needs to change. And so for days in deep pain, I couldn't speak. Words are hollow. They fill the space, only with more discomfort. After each of these tragedies, the words of condolence kind of become pro forma or even performance, and the requisite prayers are empty. In fact, what I can give voice to as a clergyman, as a clergy person, is that the call to and the prayers themselves, I now realize, are actually manipulations to the serious conversations that have to take place. But people want to avoid responsibility. And so when issues are addressed, the refrain that I hear anyway, and both I hear it said to others in the news, but I hear it myself also, don't politicize tragedy. But that itself is a cynical politicization, and it's a shirking of responsibility, because this is about politics. And politics are about the lives that a nation need to live. Religion has been used and abused throughout millennium. It's being used and abused here also. So our hearts are broken. And my conversation with you reflects the depth of my own sadness and your sadness, the depth of my deep feelings and your feelings, and also the depth of my anger. And I've seen a lot of rage around me over this week amongst the people I work with, the mothers that drop their little children off at our preschool. You know, and you've heard this often, that in the Torah, after the death of Aaron's two sons, his response was Vayidom Aharon, or the response we read about was Vayidom Aharon, and Aaron was silent. I think we need to begin with silence. But all of those who are parents and grandparents, kids and grandkids, we're shuddering as we think of them going into schools that don't have proper protection. The night of the murders, my 36-year-old daughter called me and she said, "Abba, how do I send Manny to school tomorrow?" I really couldn't answer that well. I don't know how a mother sends a kid to a school when they're not certain about the protection that's provided, and yet we know that the mother has to send her child to school. So why is it happening over and over and over again? Why has there not been effective responsive? Why does America lead the world in violent gun murders? Why do we have legislators and political leadership that are stymied and ineffective? Why are there so many signs of disturbed, violent people that go unnoticed and they're not responded to? Why? Why can an 18-year-old boy who couldn't even buy a beer buy an automatic weapon without a background check? Why? Why? Why do we sell automatic weapons, weapons of war? Do you know why? I do have a speech in me that I can't give. It's a very passionate speech. But I'm not going to go there, not today. What I want to do, though, is use what comes most naturally to me. What I want to do is look at aspects of our tradition and our scripture and find some meaning, perhaps some inspiration, because I do believe our tradition is meant to help in these areas too. And I do believe that that's my responsibility here. I thought about the fact that we as a people, the Jewish people, beginning as the Hebrew people, with a story about one man named Avraham who becomes Avraham, how he leaves his homeland and sets out to create a new nation. And that nation we know is to be rooted in tzedek and mishpat, in righteousness, in kindness, and in justice. Why didn't Avraham do this from the place he was? Why didn't he do it from Haran? Why did he have to go to another land? It's an important question. And we receive insights from our teachers and our rabbis about this question. And there we learn that our origin story as a people came from a departure from a land that was pagan and a place that sacrificed children. Avraham had to leave. The priority in our lives is our children. The life of your children, my children, our children, that is our priority. We have to keep our children safe. Inaction when it comes to our future generations is not an option. It is never an option. We were reading a text in my Torah class yesterday morning that comes from the end of the book of Deuteronomy, the end of Devarim. And it's similar in some ways to the Tokecha that we read this morning. The people are going to enter into the land and they are receiving final instructions. They know that they will be without Moshe, their leader, the man who had led them from slavery to freedom, the man who had represented them at Sinai where they received God's revelation and law, the man who helped them coalesce into a people. And Moshe at this moment teaches them that they will have a Torah that will serve as a guide, as a teaching, and if they follow it, if they follow God, they'll find a blessing, but if not, just like today's Parsha that we read, they will suffer. In the section that we read from the end of Deuteronomy, though, I imagine that the author saw the question about how could they suffer so much if there's a God who's omniscient? And what it says is that God will hide his face, and then the suffering will take place. Is it because God cannot stand to see the suffering of his children, or perhaps there is another reason? And the other reason that we spoke about in the class is that God is actually present in this world when we bring God in the world, when we bring goodness into the world, when we bring holiness into the world, when we honor our mothers and fathers, when we honor our children, and when we do not do those things, then God metaphorically hides his face. We are agents of goodness if we wish to be. But we can also assist evil if we do nothing. There is no room for indifference. Elie Wiesel spoke about that over and over and over again as he recalled the Holocaust and tried to find meaning in this world. And he saw the greatest sin of all was the sin of indifference. If we do nothing in the face of a nation that's plagued by hatred and division and racism and violence, we will see suffering, and we will add to that. It is important to realize that whatever we do, and for that matter, things we don't do, is what make the difference. The other night I spoke about the world of physics, where we learn that for every action there's a reaction. We can observe when we throw a stone into a pond of water, the stone not only impacts the place of entry, but it creates ripples that widen into circles and change the body of water. So we read this morning this parsha in Vayikra that contains the Tokecha, the warning to the people. But what's so important here is that the language of the Torah, although it creates an image of God in it and in control, it's not really about that. It's about you and me. It's about people. It's about people as the agents for God. People who make a difference in the world. And it's us then that carry the responsibility. And so even here in this house of worship, we have to turn within and look at ourselves and join with each other. There's this beautiful perspective that I learned from a Bible scholar who was also a pulpit rabbi when I went to rabbinical school by the name of Dr. Robert Gordis. He's the uncle of the famous Danny Gordis. Dr. Gordis said, God's world is not yet fully formed or experienced. In fact, he said, as long as there's life, God's world will never be fully formed. We are created to be God's partners, as it were, and to engage in the works of trying to improve the world and trying to redeem a world that is not yet finished and not yet redeemed. Our task then is to develop ourselves to be contributors towards that world. We're not there yet. We've got to get there, though. And on these days, we see that there is an urgency in it. I don't speak to any particular ideology. I speak to everyone. Our engagement in electoral politics, our engagement in gun safety, our engagement in issues of fairness and freedom and education and mental health, that's the way we respond to the call of the moment and to its urgency. Our activity, our response allows us to gain a small semblance of hope. So Gord has pointed out that we lose perspective because we often stand too close to the imperfections. Abraham Joshua Heschel once taught that God's world is like a work of art. Every word we speak, every deed we do is like a stroke of the brush on that piece of art. And Gord has said then, when you get too close to the work of art, when you get too close to the painting, we lose its perspective and we can lose a sense of its beauty. And then we move further away and we can see that creation is in fact, or has in fact, the potential for order and beauty. Our job is to preserve it, but we also know that there's rot in it. So each of us share in the obligation to improve the blotches, the stains, the errors, and to gain the perspective that we can have when we move a little farther away. And that's why I bristle at the manipulation of religion. To be a Jew is to enter into not only a relationship with God, but it's to understand that we are in a relationship with people and with the world, and that's how we're going to be judged. It's not about your faith nearly as much as your deeds. And so the relationship demands a lot of you, of me, of all of us. It is not a time to think that help will come from somewhere else, be that other people or something otherworldly. It'll only come from us. Remember when Avraham was told by God that God said, I will destroy these two cities of Sodom and Gomorrah? For some reason, God felt he needed man's input here, a man's input. And do you remember what Abraham's response was? He said, Chalila lecha, far be it from you, O God, to do such a thing. Far be it from you to bring death upon the innocent. Far be it from you. Nope. Our prayers are going to be found in the way we vote. Our prayers are going to be found in where we go. Our prayers will be found in our hands, and our prayers will be found when we find our voices. The prophet Isaiah said, though you pray at length, I will not listen, because your hands are stained with crime. Wash yourselves clean, Isaiah said. Put your evil doings away from my sight. Learn to do good and devote yourself to justice. Aid the victims. Our work, my friends, our work, the lives of each other, the lives of our children, that must be our religious calling, and that must become our mantra. The rabbis taught us in Pirkei Avot, it's not up to you to complete the task, but you are not free to desist. So what are we doing? What am I doing? Each of us has to ask that question. Shabbat Shalom.